Every single one of these cases is an unspeakable tragedy, but some go beyond heartbreak and plunge into the realm of horror, making our blood run cold. Take, for example, the chilling events that unfolded at Knott's Berry Farm in Buena Park, California, on September 21, 2001. What began as a private party, meant to offer some relief to 40-year-old Lori Mason Lors, ended in unimaginable sorrow. Lori, a mother of 5, had joined the celebration with her 4 older children, while her youngest stayed home with her husband, who was gravely ill and awaiting a liver transplant. It was a day meant to bring a brief escape from her family's struggles. As the evening drew to a close, the group decided to end their day with one last ride. The Perilous Plunge, a heart-stopping attraction that soared to a towering height of 37 meters. Passengers were lifted to its peak before being hurtled down into a pool below at a blistering speed of 80 km/h. Despite the ominous name, Lori had no reason to hesitate. She was 177 centimeters tall and weighed 128 kilos, but noticed no posted restrictions for overweight riders. Confidently, she boarded the raft with her 3 children. Her 12-year-old daughter even helped secure the safety belts, which turned out to be a bit too short. No staff member intervened to ensure the belts were properly fitted or that Lori was seated safely. As the raft climbed to its peak and began its final descent, tragedy struck. The raft tilted forward, and Lori was thrown from her seat. In a terrifying sequence, she hit her head during the fall, resulting in a catastrophic skull fracture. Moments later, the impact of her body tore off one of her limbs. Lori's children, frozen with horror, watched helplessly as their mother fell to her death. She was rushed to the hospital but succumbed to her injuries within an hour. An investigation revealed a chilling web of negligence. Faulty ride structures and inadequate safety restraints were identified as primary causes of the accident. Even more shocking, the Perilous Plunge did have weight restrictions, but they were not properly communicated or enforced. Despite these glaring safety oversights, Knott's Berry Farm employees allowed Lori to ride, failing to ensure her restraints were secure. The aftermath brought some semblance of justice. Lori's family filed a lawsuit, ultimately accepting a settlement agreement. Yet, in a decision that left many questioning the park's priorities, the Perilous Plunge continued operating for another 11 years before finally being shut down. Stories like Lori's serve as grim reminders of the life and death stakes behind amusement park thrills. They highlight the importance of accountability and strict safety measures, showing how lapses in judgment and communication can lead to irreparable loss. And while some companies at least attempt to offer settlements after such tragedies, others barely acknowledge their negligence, sometimes even when entire families fall victim to their oversight. Each story reveals the devastating consequences of ignoring the red flags that haunt the dark side of thrill-seeking adventures. Let's talk about Disneyland's monorail. Sleek, futuristic, and practically synonymous with the word iconic. It zips gracefully through the park like a scene straight out of a retro sci-fi movie, promising every passenger a front-row seat to the magic. And yes, you probably have that catchy monorail, monorail, monorail tune stuck in your head right now. Technically, it's Disney's now, so they've got you there too. But as much as this sleek marvel screams innovation and safety, there's a side to it that reminds us humans don't always make the smartest choices. Enter the tragic story of Thomas Guy Cleveland. The date was June 17, 1966. Thomas was a 19-year-old from Northridge, California, with a plan: visit Disneyland. Sounds simple enough, right? But for reasons we'll never know, Thomas decided not to use the main entrance like, well, everyone else. Maybe he didn't want to cough up the admission fee. Maybe he was chasing some thrill of rebellion. Or maybe he genuinely thought he'd discovered the ultimate Disneyland hack. Whatever the reason, he made the fateful choice to sneak into the park by climbing onto the monorail track. Now, let's pause for a moment. You've got to admit, Walking along a track built for high-speed trains doesn't exactly scream smart decision, but hindsight is 20/20, and at the time, Thomas probably thought he was being clever. Unfortunately, he was about to find out the hard way that clever and dangerous don't mix. As Thomas strolled along the track, a security officer spotted him and immediately tried to intervene. The officer shouted warnings, desperately urging him to get off the track. But whether it was adrenaline, panic, or sheer disbelief, Thomas didn't stop. Perhaps he thought he had more time. Perhaps he thought he could outrun the monorail. Spoiler alert, he couldn't. The monorail came speeding toward him, and tragedy struck. The train hit Thomas and dragged him underneath, causing fatal injuries. It was a heartbreaking incident that not only claimed a young life, but also became one of the first deaths in Disneyland's history. For a park known as the happiest place on Earth, it was a grim reminder that even in a world of pixie dust and magic, bad decisions can lead to devastating consequences. Thomas's story stands out not just because of its tragic nature, but because of the underlying lesson it carries. Disneyland's transportation systems are meticulously designed to be safe, as long as you use them properly. When people ignore safety protocols or take unnecessary risks, even the most magical places can turn perilous. The monorail, in particular, seems to have an almost magnetic ability to tempt people into risky behavior. Maybe it's the allure of the tracks or the thrill of sneaking into the park. But one thing is clear. Those sleek, futuristic trains aren't forgiving when people stray into their path. So, what's the takeaway here? If you're planning a trip to Disneyland, stick to the official entrances. Sure, they might not have the same rebellious charm as sneaking in, but they'll get you to the churro stand alive and well. Shortcuts might seem appealing, but as Thomas's tragic story shows, they're not worth the risk. The next time you see that monorail gliding through the park, take a moment to appreciate it, and remember, it's best admired from a safe distance. Rest in peace, Thomas, and let's all do our part to keep the magic and ourselves alive. 5 family members in Busan plummeted to their deaths from this Ferris wheel, a tragedy that spanned 3 of their generations. Unbelievable, isn't it? When you think of Ferris wheels, you picture a gentle, serene ride with breathtaking views. Definitely not a scene of unimaginable horror. But for one family in Busan, South Korea, this beloved amusement ride became the stage for an unspeakable tragedy. The setting? A movable attraction park known as the World Carnival, which offered 30 thrilling rides, including a towering 66-meter Ferris wheel. On August 13, 2007, the ride was bustling as usual, and one of its compartments was occupied by a family of 7, spanning 3 generations. As the giant wheel began to rotate, their cabin malfunctioned. Instead of smoothly adjusting to stay upright, it abruptly stopped, leaving the passengers helplessly shifting to one side. The family piled against the cabin's glass window. Then, the unthinkable happened. The glass, unable to bear the weight, cracked, and in a heart-stopping moment, 5 members of the family fell 20 meters to their deaths. The victims ranged from just 7 years old to 68, leaving a community and the survivors devastated. Against all odds, 2 passengers managed to cling desperately to the wheel and survive. Among them was a 70-year-old man, John Eun-sung, whose miraculous survival was overshadowed by profound loss. He said, "The slowly moving gondola suddenly stopped and turned upside down, and family members fell in a flash. In an instant, nearly his entire family was gone. But what could have caused such a catastrophic failure? The shocking answer boiled down to something so small, yet so devastating. A single, improperly installed screw. That tiny screw, meant to secure the cabin and keep it aligned during the ride's rotation, had been installed incorrectly. Instead of ensuring the passenger's safety, it blocked the mechanism that was supposed to keep the cabin upright, turning it into a death trap. One screw was responsible for claiming 5 lives. If you think that such a massive failure would result in swift accountability, think again. Shockingly, no employees from the park were arrested, and no significant action was taken against those responsible. The negligence that led to this tragedy was met with inaction, leaving grieving families without justice. Even worse, the World Carnival continued operating after the incident, as if nothing had happened. It's a grim reminder of how sometimes, even the most devastating events fail to trigger change or accountability in the amusement park industry. This horrifying story begs the question: if a tragedy of this magnitude doesn't force law enforcement to act, what happens with lesser incidents? Those where lives aren't lost, but danger is evident. It's a terrifying thought, isn't it? After all, when you step into an amusement park, you trust that every screw, bolt, and mechanism is meticulously maintained. Yet, stories like this prove how deadly negligence can be. It's June 25, 2000. Cristina Moreno, a bright-eyed 23-year-old from Barcelona, Spain, is on the trip of a lifetime. Fresh off her wedding, she and her new husband are honeymooning in California. And of course, Disneyland is on the itinerary, because what's more romantic than the happiest place on Earth? Their day is filled with laughter, churros, and snapshots with Mickey Mouse, but the grand finale, the Indiana Jones Adventure Ride. It's the kind of ride that promises thrills, chills, and maybe a moment of sheer panic as boulders almost crush you. Cristina and her husband buckle in, ready for an adventure that will surely become a treasured honeymoon memory. But here's where things take a dark turn. After the ride, Cristina complains of a headache, a serious one. Not your average "I need a coffee" headache. They decide to cut the day short and head back to their hotel to rest. But the headache doesn't just linger, it intensifies. Concerned, her husband rushes her to Cedars Sinai Medical Center, where doctors drop a devastating diagnosis. Cristina has suffered a brain hemorrhage. Despite the best efforts of medical professionals, Cristina never recovers. On September 1st, 2000, just a little over 2 months after her magical Disneyland visit, she tragically passes away from a cerebral aneurysm. Now, as heartbreaking as this story already is, the plot thickens. Cristina's family believes her death wasn't just an unfortunate coincidence, but directly tied to the Indiana Jones ride. They file a lawsuit against Disney, claiming that the ride's intense shaking and stress caused the aneurysm to rupture. And honestly, if you've ever been on that ride, you might see their point. It's not exactly a gentle cruise. It's more like being tossed around in a Jeep that forgot it had suspension. The lawsuit argued that Disney had prior knowledge of injuries caused by the ride and failed to make it safer or adequately warn passengers about potential risks. Here's where it gets really interesting. Cristina's lawyer, Barry Novak, wasn't new to this game. He'd already handled other cases involving brain injuries from the Indiana Jones adventure. 2 of those cases were quietly settled, and let's just say Disney wasn't about to let this one go to trial either. Publicly, though, Disneyland stood firm. Their spokesperson, Rai Gomez, defended the ride, insisting it was safe and not responsible for Cristina's tragic death. Rob Doty, Disneyland Resort's vice president of communications, even emphasized that safety was their top priority. Yet, the Moreno family's lawsuit clearly rattled the company, as they eventually settled for an undisclosed amount. Of course, in classic corporate style, Disney didn't admit to any wrongdoing. Cristina's story is a tragic reminder that even in places designed for joy, life can take an unexpected and heartbreaking turn. While the Indiana Jones ride continues to thrill visitors today, stories like hers add a sobering layer to the excitement. Next time you're gripping the safety bar on a high-speed attraction, remember to hold on tight. And maybe, just maybe, whisper a little thank you to the universe for a safe landing. A thrilling adventure at the world's tallest water slide at Schlitterbahn Water Park revealed shocking safety failures that would haunt the park and 10-year-old Caleb's family forever. It was supposed to be a perfect summer day, August 7th, 2016. Michelle and Scott Schwab, a Kansas couple, decided to take their 4 sons to Schlitterbahn Water Park in Kansas City. The occasion, Elected Officials Day, a special annual event granting free park admission to public officials and their families. For Scott, a Kansas State representative, it was a fun family outing, and for their sons, it was a dream come true. Excitement buzzed through the air, especially for Caleb, the Schwab's energetic 10-year-old, who could barely contain his enthusiasm. At the center of Caleb's excitement was Schlitterbahn's crown jewel, Verrückt, a jaw-dropping water slide whose name fittingly means insane in German. Towering 168 feet 7 inches tall, Verrückt wasn't just any slide. It was the tallest water slide in the world at the time. Designed by Jeff Henry, co-owner of the park, Verrückt promised an exhilarating ride from its 17-story drop to its heart-pounding twists and turns. Caleb couldn't wait to try it. The towering slide had no age restrictions, a decision that would later haunt many. A safety consultant had once suggested a minimum age of 16, but this advice wasn't heeded. As a result, Caleb, just 10 years old, was allowed to join his older brother Nathan, 12, for the thrilling ride. When they reached the park, the boys excitedly informed their parents of their plan to tackle Verrückt together. Their father, Scott, gave a simple instruction: brothers stick together. These would be the last words he would ever say to Caleb. The brothers climbed the 264 steps to the top of Verrückt, the anticipation growing with every step. Nathan went first, descending the towering slide with exhilaration. Caleb eagerly awaited his turn at the top. When it was finally time, he climbed into Raft B, sitting at the front while two women sat behind him. Together, their combined weight met the park's guidelines, but what happened next was nothing short of a nightmare. As the raft hurtled down the slide, it became clear something was wrong. On the second hill, the raft went airborne, soaring off the chute's surface. Caleb, weighing just 73 pounds, was violently thrown against a metal pole supporting the ride's netting system. The impact was fatal. Caleb was decapitated instantly. Witnesses at the bottom watched in stunned horror as the tragedy unfolded. Caleb's brother Nathan, who had been waiting, saw everything. He screamed, "My brother flew off the slide," as their mother, Michelle, tried to reach Caleb, only to be stopped by onlookers who knew the scene would be too much for any parent to bear. Scott, Caleb's father, was left shattered when he learned his son hadn't survived. The tragedy sparked an investigation that revealed a series of horrifying safety failures. Caleb's lightweight created an uneven distribution in Raft B, causing it to go faster and more airborne than others. Shockingly, Verrückt had been plagued with problems even before it opened. During testing, sandbags repeatedly flew off the rafts, and engineering experts had flagged serious risks. Yet, the ride debuted anyway, with Jeff Henry defending its safety. Caleb's death wasn't an isolated incident. 13 other riders had suffered injuries on Verrückt, including concussions and spinal damage. In the aftermath of Caleb's death, Schlitterbahn reached a $20 million settlement with the Schwab family. Verrückt was dismantled, and the water park itself shut its doors in September 2018. Legal charges against Jeff Henry and others were eventually dropped, but the tragedy left a lasting scar on all involved. What began as a day of joy became an unimaginable nightmare, a chilling reminder that even the most thrilling attractions can harbor deadly risks. The Matterhorn Bobsleds at Disneyland is famous for its exhilarating twists, icy slopes, and stunning views. It's a ride that promises thrills, but it also carries a lesser-known somber legacy. While the Matterhorn is often associated with excitement, it's also the site of one of Disneyland's earliest and most tragic incidents. Buckle up, because what was once a fun-filled adventure turned into a nightmare for one young visitor, Mark Maples. It was the summer of 1964 when 15-year-old Mark Maples from Long Beach visited Disneyland with two of his friends. Like many teenagers, they were eager to experience all the park's attractions, and the Matterhorn, one of the newest and most exciting rides, was high on their list. But for Mark, the thrilling bobsled ride would take a tragic turn after a fateful decision, a decision that would cost him his life. As Mark and his friends ascended the Matterhorn's icy mountain, the excitement was palpable. However, in his youthful excitement and perhaps the rush of the moment, Mark decided to take matters into his own hands. He ignored the safety instructions that had been repeated to every rider before boarding. Mark unbuckled his seatbelt and, in what could only be described as an ill-advised act of curiosity, tried to stand up while the bobsled sped along the track. Whether it was teenage bravado or a misguided attempt to get a better view of the ride's unique interior, no one can say for sure. What we do know is that Mark's decision to stand up mid-ride was the catalyst for the tragedy that followed. As the bobsled raced down the track at about 20 miles per hour, it reached a sharp curve. Mark lost his balance and was violently ejected from the sled. He fell directly onto the track below, sustaining catastrophic injuries, including head trauma, shattered ribs, and severe internal damage. The ride's interior was dark, making it difficult for Mark's friends to notice the gravity of the situation. One friend felt Mark collide with him briefly during the ride, but didn't fully realize what had happened until the sled reached the end of the line. When the ride finally came to a stop, Mark's friends immediately reported him missing. At first, operators dismissed their concerns, assuming it was just an overreaction or a misunderstanding. It wasn't until two girls in the sled behind them confirmed seeing someone fall that the ride was stopped for investigation. The discovery was grim. Mark was found unconscious on a ledge, about a third of the way down the mountain. He had fallen hard and was in critical condition. Despite being rushed to the hospital, his injuries were too severe. Mark passed away a few days later, leaving his friends, family, and the entire park community devastated. The Anaheim police chief ruled the incident an accident, following a thorough investigation. Disneyland officials later confirmed the tragic truth. Mark had unbuckled his seatbelt and stood up during the ride, which had caused his fatal fall. Mark's death was a wake-up call, one that highlighted just how important it is to follow safety guidelines on amusement park rides. Not only did Mark's death mark Disneyland's first fatality, but it also underscored how even the smallest decision, ignoring the rules for just a second, can lead to irreversible consequences. Today, the Matterhorn Bobsleds remain one of Disneyland's most iconic and beloved attractions, drawing guests from all over the world. But for those who know its history, the ride serves as a somber reminder of the potential dangers that lie in thrill-seeking gone wrong. So, the next time you hear a safety announcement or see the seatbelt warning on a ride, remember Mark Maples' story. Safety rules may seem restrictive, but they exist for a reason, keeping the magic alive without turning it into tragedy. In April 1997, the Wildcat roller coaster at Bell's Amusement Park derailed, hurling 14-year-old Patrick Kurek to his death. Roller coasters are often the crown jewel of any amusement park, embodying the thrills and adrenaline rush that draw millions of visitors each year. As some of the oldest and most iconic amusement rides in history, they've become a symbol of fun and daring adventure. But beneath the twists, turns, and gravity-defying loops lies a chilling reality. Roller coasters are also the deadliest rides in the park. In the span of a decade, a staggering 73% of deadly amusement ride accidents in the U.S. occurred on roller coasters. Could the issue be tied to outdated technology? After all, many of these rides were constructed decades ago, back in the 1970s and 80s. One such tragic example is the infamous Wildcat ride at Bell's Amusement Park in Oklahoma. In 1975, Bell's Amusement Park introduced the Wildcat, a roller coaster featuring a single car capable of carrying 4 passengers. At its peak, the ride climbed to the height of a 4-story building, promising a thrilling drop. But in April of 1997, the Wildcat's thrill turned into a horrifying nightmare. At the coaster's highest point, a car derailed with 3 teenagers on board. Hurtling uncontrollably back down the slope, the car collided with another one waiting to begin its ascent. The impact was catastrophic. The crash flung 14-year-old Patrick Couric and his classmates Ryan and Deontay from their seats. Patrick tragically lost his life at the scene, while Ryan and Deontay were rushed to the hospital with severe fractures and head injuries. In the second car, a man named Johnny Fagan and his 3 young passengers, a 12-year-old, a 9-year-old, and a 3-year-old, were left shaken but escaped with only minor injuries. The park's handling of the tragedy only added fuel to the fire. Instead of halting all operations to investigate, the owners chose to keep the other rides running, claiming they didn't want to cause panic. But as details of the incident emerged, it became clear that visitors had every reason to be alarmed. The Wildcat's derailment wasn't just a freak accident. It was the result of multiple mechanical failures. First, the car detached from the wire rope responsible for pulling it to the top. Then, the emergency brakes, designed to stop the car in such situations, completely failed. These combined faults set the stage for the deadly disaster. Shockingly, after the accident, the Wildcat wasn't destroyed. Instead, it was relocated and reassembled at another site. Bell's amusement park itself remained in operation until 2006 when it was closed, not for safety concerns but due to issues with rent. Today, its abandoned grounds stand as an eerie reminder of its dark history. The story of the Wildcat is a chilling example of how outdated technology, inadequate maintenance, and poor decision-making can turn a day of fun into a tragedy. While roller coasters continue to captivate thrill-seekers, this tale serves as a sobering reminder of the risks that come with pushing the limits of adrenaline-fueled entertainment. So, next time you strap in, take a moment to appreciate the engineering, but also the responsibility behind the ride. Let us tell you about a story that might make you rethink the cheerful tune of It's a Small World. Picture this: Disneyland, California, the brainchild of Walt Disney himself, often celebrated as the happiest, most magical place on Earth. But beneath the fairy tale facade, even this utopia has had its share of dark moments. By 2003, 27 people had tragically died at Disneyland, casting a shadow over its glittering reputation. Among these incidents, one stands out for its sheer absurdity and heartbreak: the ordeal of Jose Martinez. In 2009, Jose, a quadriplegic man, decided to enjoy the park with his wife, taking a ride on the iconic It's a Small World. It was supposed to be a relaxing, feel-good experience, filled with animated dolls singing a cheerful anthem of unity. But things quickly went sideways when the ride broke down. While other passengers were promptly evacuated, Martinez was left stranded in his boat, unable to move or escape. And that's when the nightmare truly began. For 40 agonizing minutes, Martinez was trapped, forced to endure the infamous It's a Small World song on an unending loop. Now, for most of us, that would already be the stuff of nightmares, but for Martinez it was much worse. Due to his spinal cord injury, the overstimulation triggered a condition called autonomic dysreflexia. It's a fancy term for a dangerous reaction that can spike blood pressure, potentially leading to strokes or even death. As Martinez sat helplessly in his little boat of doom, his stress and discomfort escalated. Panic attacks set in, his blood pressure skyrocketed, and the relentless music only added insult to injury. Attempts to silence the ride's speakers failed, leaving Martinez trapped in a surreal, tormenting loop of cheerful melodies. What's meant to be a catchy earworm for most became a literal health hazard for him. Disneyland's response? Not exactly magical. According to spokesperson Susie Brown, the park believed it had provided adequate assistance during the incident, but the U.S. District Court thought otherwise. Judge James Selna ruled that Disneyland had failed to properly warn disabled guests about the risks of being stranded on the ride. It was a damning verdict, underscoring the park's failure to meet basic accessibility and safety standards for all its visitors. Martinez's lawsuit wasn't just about his personal ordeal. Sure, the $888,000 settlement, split between pain and suffering and violations of disability laws, offered some justice. But his attorney, David Geffen, made it clear this was about something bigger. "We won on public policy," he explained, emphasizing the need for theme parks to take the rights and needs of disabled guests seriously. The case served as a wake-up call. It highlighted the importance of prioritizing accessibility and ensuring that even the most vulnerable visitors can safely enjoy Disneyland's magic without the risk of harm or a 40-minute soundtrack-induced meltdown. So, the next time you hop on It's a Small World, remember Jose Martinez and his harrowing tale. Because while Disneyland is a beloved escape for millions, it's also proof that even in the happiest places on Earth, safety and inclusion are no small matters. Rosa Ayala Esparza lived for adventure and making memories with her family. On July 19, 2013, during her first trip to Six Flags over Texas, she decided on one last thrill before heading home. But what began as a day of joy ended in unthinkable tragedy, changing her family's lives forever. On the warm summer evening of July 19, 2013, Rosa Ayala Esparza and her family were soaking up the excitement at Six Flags over Texas in Arlington. It had been a day filled with laughter, thrill-seeking, and making memories on some of the park's most iconic rides. As the day wore on, it was nearly time to head home. But Rosa, with her adventurous spirit, had one final ride in mind, one that would tragically mark her last adventure ever. At 52 years old, Rosa was on her first ever visit to Six Flags. She was a vibrant woman, eager to explore new experiences, and that day she was joined by her daughter and son-in-law. Six Flags over Texas, renowned for its high-octane attractions, was the perfect destination for thrill-seekers like Rosa. One ride in particular had caught her attention, the new Texas Giant. This hybrid roller coaster, combining the nostalgic charm of wood with the smooth precision of steel, had been revamped in 2011. Towering 153 feet tall with a stomach-dropping 147-foot plunge, it was touted as one of the park's crown jewels. However, beneath the gleaming surface of this thrill machine lay a grim legacy. The new Texas Giant replaced the original all-wood coaster, which had been shuttered due to safety concerns and guest complaints about its jarring ride. Little did Rosa or her family know that history had an ominous way of repeating itself. At approximately 6:40 p.m., Rosa boarded the new Texas Giant, settling into Car 3. Fellow passengers noted she appeared uneasy, specifically about her safety restraint. Carmen Brown, another rider, later recounted how Rosa voiced her fears that the restraint didn't feel secure. A park employee attempting to reassure her reportedly said, "As long as you heard it click, you're fine." But other witnesses claimed they didn't hear any such reassuring click. Despite her apprehension, the ride began its journey, each car ascending the steep incline to the top. Moments later, screams filled the air, but these were not screams of exhilaration. Rosa's daughter, riding nearby, quickly realized something was terribly wrong. She turned to check on her mother and was met with a horrifying sight. Rosa was almost upside down, her head nearing the floor and her feet pointing skyward. Two passengers behind her desperately tried to intervene but couldn't reach her in time. As the coaster climbed its third hill, the unthinkable happened. Rosa was ejected from her seat. Her family could do nothing but watch in helpless horror. Rosa was thrown from the ride, her body colliding with the structure below. When the ride finally returned to the station, her distraught family begged staff to let them out, desperate to help her. But it was too late. Paramedics arrived within minutes, but Rosa had already succumbed to her injuries. Her body was found wrapped around a support beam in the honky-tonk tunnel, with debris scattered over a harrowing 75-foot radius. The aftermath of the tragedy uncovered unsettling truths. Employees had noticed that Rosa's restraint appeared a little high, or not as tight as it should have been. Additionally, reports surfaced that the safety system, which was supposed to prevent such accidents, had malfunctioned earlier that week. Disturbingly, another rider had reported similar issues with the same car just days before Rose's accident. Despite this, Six Flags claimed there were no mechanical faults, and the tragedy was officially ruled an accident. Rose's family, devastated by the preventable loss, filed a lawsuit against the park, seeking justice and accountability. Six Flags settled the case in November 2014, introducing updated safety measures like redesigned restraints and seatbelts. Still, Rose's death serves as a haunting reminder of the risks inherent in thrill rides and the devastating consequences when safety protocols fail. Here's a story that's equal parts tragic and bizarre, a grim reminder that not even Disneyland's whimsical charm can erase the unexpected twists life throws our way. Meet Joanne Aguilar, a 66-year-old woman who loved adventures despite her mobility challenges. On August 22, 2021, she visited Disneyland with her 2 adult daughters, ready for a day of fun, laughter, and cherished memories. Spoiler alert, what happened next was anything but magical. The family decided to hop on the iconic Jungle Cruise. You know, the one with pun-loving skippers who make bad jokes about hippos and backside of water gags. But there was a hiccup. There wasn't a wheelchair-accessible boat available. The cast members assured Joanne that she could still ride a standard boat if her daughters helped her aboard. Determined not to let the minor inconvenience spoil the day, Joanne agreed, and, with a bit of assistance, she made it onto the boat. Smooth sailing, right? Well, not quite. The ride itself went off without a hitch. Tigers leaping 20 feet, hippos lurking in the water, all standard Jungle Cruise flair, delivered with the classic deadpan humor. It was all smiles until it wasn't. When the ride ended, it was time to disembark, and that's where things took a turn for the tragic. Joanne, with her daughters by her side, attempted to exit the boat. The cast members had placed some small blocks on the steps to help lower their height, a seemingly thoughtful gesture. But as Joanne maneuvered to step out, she lost her balance and fell backward into the boat. The fall fractured her right femur, a devastating injury. What should have been a lighthearted adventure turned into a nightmare as Joanne was rushed to the hospital. Months passed, and Joanne's recovery journey was anything but smooth. She was transferred to a rehabilitation facility where complications piled on. Tragically, 5 months after the accident, Joanne developed an infection, went into septic shock, and passed away on January 29, 2022. The Aguilar family, heartbroken and grieving, filed a lawsuit against Disney, alleging negligence and mistreatment. They claimed that cast members not only failed to provide proper assistance, but also mocked Joanne during her struggle to exit the boat. According to the lawsuit, this left Joanne feeling humiliated and ashamed. The family also argued that the small blocks placed on the steps were unsecured and posed additional risks. Disney, however, painted a different picture. The company denied all liability, stating that Joanne's injuries were a result of her own actions. They emphasized that the Jungle Cruise offers a wheelchair-accessible boat for guests who require it, but Joanne opted to ride the standard boat with her daughter's help. In court, Disney argued that the family was aware of the potential risks associated with the visit and requested that the lawsuit be dismissed. As the legal battle continues, the Aguilar family's attorney, Michael Gandon, has spoken out about their heartbreak. He described how the family had gone to Disneyland to create joyful memories, only to leave with a profound sense of loss and indignity. They remember the lack of dignity and respect shown to their mother, he said, which ultimately led to her death. The case remains unresolved, casting a shadow over Disneyland's carefully curated image of happiness and harmony. It's a stark reminder that even in the happiest place on Earth, things can go horribly wrong, and sometimes no amount of pixie dust can fix them.